Everyone has got an opportunity, I think, to find a really great path and a really great career. Before we sit down and we might be having a coffee, they'll say to me, forgetting that they haven't muted or left their camera on and wandering off and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I think one of the worst things or most risky things I've seen recently are...
You ain't getting me on stage. I'm not going to talk.
If you're doing something that you enjoy and you have that level of expertise in what you're doing, I think it's a lot more easier to come out of your shell a little bit and talk to people about it. What's new? Tell me. And what's really exciting at the moment, I think, in our space, particularly with digital advertising, is Hi, I'm James, and I'm taking you behind the future.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Future, and I have a fantastic co-host with me today, Zachary. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Zachary. I go to MGGS. I'm in year 12 and I'm studying media, politics and economics.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. And then we have a wonderful guest, someone I've known for quite a long while now, the wonderful James. James, tell us who you are and what you do.
I will. Thank you for having me. So I'm James Bavington and I'm the Chief Product Officer at Strategic. We're based here in Shoreditch in London. We're a team of about 65 and we're a brand and performance marketing agency.
Fantastic. So over to Zachary for your first question.
Yeah, James, I understand you're the co-owner of Strategic. How did you get into that position?
Great question. So Strategic was set up and founded about 12 years ago. And the original sort of founder of the agency, I used to work with at my previous agency. So we had a really great relationship working together as directors at this previous agency. We're based in the Midlands, and fundamentally, the company was going in a bit of a different direction to where we wanted to go. So my now colleague and business partner, Andy, set up Strategic. I couldn't quite join on day one because I was on the home straight to getting married. So I committed to Andy that I would join him, just a short while later. And Andy started the company pretty much out of his house from his kitchen table with his wife, Sarah. And then I joined shortly afterwards. And we built the business up from there to what it is today.
Brilliant. Most good businesses start around a kitchen table, don't they?
They do indeed. And I think it really puts the emphasis on working hard, getting the right clients, making sure that every minute that you spend matters, because, when you're in that sort of startup phase and, paying your mortgage and, looking after your families is kind of, on the line, so to speak. So it really does, put you into the focus of making sure that it works.
Definitely. Yeah. I love it. So you were working together at an agency. Was that your first job, or was that how far do we need to go back to understand how you got into the world of agencies?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great choice. I mean, I've worked since I could pick up a newspaper bag and I've always been hardworking in nature. So, as a student, I went to Warwickshire College, studied graphic design. Then I went on to university at Coventry to also study graphic design. And even throughout that process, I was perhaps unknowingly developing skills working in hospitality, which I'd recommend to anybody because it put me into a situation where I was having to solve problems, relate to people in real time. So I used to work in a restaurant, a Pizza Hut, and again, taught me some really fabulous skills of standards processes being organized. But as soon as I left university back in 2006, I had a couple of options ahead of me and ended up falling straight into this role, which was that kind of job that I had for 10 years where I met and worked with Andy. And it was at an agency that was based in Lutterworth in the Midlands. And, even when I first started, some of the work we were doing was designing Yellow Pages adverts, which you're thankfully probably too young, Zachary, to remember
I don't know
what the Yellow Pages was. So back then, if people wanted to find a local business like, a wedding photographer or even a locksmith, you'd pick up this big yellow book and flip through all these adverts. So that was my first introduction, if you like, to the world of marketing and advertising, just sort of sat creating these little graphics that would be put in the book.
And they were the fancy ones if they had a design, because sometimes it was just a listing, wasn't it? And then you could pay extra to have a box and the size of box you could have. And
exactly.
It's mad, isn't it? Do you know, I saw a meme at the weekend actually on Instagram saying I can't believe we used to have a book of everybody's phone number. You used to have the phone book you'd have the phone book in the yellow pages being thicker, but you could literally look up anyone's phone number.
Yeah.
It was just all in there. Whereas that's seen as quite data protection now. You wouldn't have that that, would you?
No, you had to be ex-directory to not be in the phone book, which was probably the only way you could get out of it by then.
Yeah.
But
we sound old now, though, by
we do
the way.
sound old.
So let's get back to sounding young and working in the cool digital sector.
Yeah, I mean, but to be fair, the transition was so quick back in that sort of first job that I had. And, we were very much watching this real-time shift as businesses moved online, which does sound a very long time ago. But the great thing is that even prior to me starting that role, where I was doing a lot of graphic design, I'd actually started to teach myself in the background, even as a student, how to code, how to build websites. And, from that moment, that's when this agency that I was working at sort of pivoted into more digital, away from print, as all the businesses and brands that we were working with were asking questions about the internet and how to be found on the internet. And I just loved it, right from the outset. And, the company grew at pace because the demand of people shifting online was just so huge.
Yeah. What was Andy's role in that business?
So Andy joined that business. I was there for about 10 years or 9.5 years. And Andy joined as the sales director. He'd got this incredible background, again, funnily enough, selling Yellow Pages ads. So he was a senior manager at the Yellow Pages, and he was brought into the agency that we worked at to really help translate and really take the audience, take the businesses that we were working with into the digital age. So I'd got a role really as sort of, I think I was head of R&D. So I was doing everything from website design development to understanding the emerging world of things like SEO and paid advertising. This was when Facebook was really kind of kicking off as well. So I was fundamentally working on the products, the technical elements, packaging the products that the agency was selling. And then Andy was putting together a team of people going out there and selling it and helping communicate it to all of these small businesses that didn't really understand or know what the internet was. Maybe they didn't even have their first website yet.
I love that, because actually, if anyone's ever thinking of starting a business, you've got to bring different skill sets together. So it feels really interesting that you were much more on the product, the technology side of it, could do all the other bits as well, but that's where your focus had been. And then Andy on the sales side. And then that feels like a match made in heaven. And then Sarah was involved as well, Andy's wife, did you say?
Yeah, that's right. So Sarah's the other co-founder and director and owner of the agency. And she comes from a background of, insurance and communication. So right from the outset, she was working with us on HR. So as we started to build out that very first team and we moved into the first offices, sorting out all things financial, the payroll, and, just being that liaison with all of our clients as well. So, the three of us and the sort of small emerging team that we had, it feels like a long time ago. I used to drive back and forth as well from my home in Rugby in the centre of England all the way to the East Coast in Ipswich, where the company was sort of set up and founded around that kitchen table.
Wow.
So it does seem a long time ago now compared to us all meeting up in London, but it was an exciting time.
But it's just interesting, isn't it, bringing those different skill sets together? Because, at the start, when you've got nothing, you all you've got is your people, you as people, and what you can bring to the table, and actually being able to bring different elements that allow you to go, actually, we've got the basis of a company here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's great that people have certain skills. They specialize in different things. And after the sort of 9 years of my first career position at this previous agency, I was at a little bit of a crossroads. I'd, sort of been reasonably successful working in that role. I really enjoyed building websites, but I was becoming more and more curious about how you market brands and businesses and get them found. And I was at this crossroads where I was talking to a friend of mine who worked at Google, and he was saying, "Oh, you'd make a great agency rep. You could come and sort of join our team." I'd got clients that I'd been working with in the background asking if I was going to sort of take a more freelance journey, pretty much working for myself. And then I had the agency route open to me. So alongside the opportunity to be part of the exciting journey that Strategic was going on, there was also a couple of other agencies that were talking to me. And I remember having quite a profound decision where the opportunity to work with and collaborate with other skill sets, to do something as a whole, something that I perhaps couldn't do for a brand independently, to work with really great skill sets, different people like data people, creatives, and, to all bring something together to create something was just really what reminded me that working in marketing, working in advertising and tech, I wanted to be part of a team, that my ability to contribute to a whole would be where I'd get the most satisfaction.
Yeah. And working with people's just the best, isn't it? It also brings some stresses sometimes. I can see that in your eyes.
Yeah.
But watching people grow and growing around others I love it.
I completely agree. the pandemic demonstrated to me as well, where we were all of a sudden working 5 days a week in an office to working 5 days a week at home, that I enjoy being around people. I enjoy learning from people. I enjoy collaborating. I enjoy helping people. The pandemic back in, when was it now? 2020.
Yeah.
It was a novelty at first. We were all in it together.
Yeah.
And, we all just kind of got on with things. But more recently, a lot of businesses, not just marketing and advertising industries, have been bringing people back together, some more so than others. And some people can work very successfully independently or from home. And, the technology we have today, with sort of conferencing is great. But I just love being around people.
Yeah, me too.
I love bouncing my ideas off people. I like helping people. I like solving problems. There's only so much I think you can do over a Zoom call, and before your distraction starts to wane and you start checking WhatsApp or loading the tumble dryer or whatever it is. So
there's always the jobs at home, isn't there?
There is.
So you must have been, were you year 7 when the pandemic hit?
Yeah, year 7.
Wow, so you just started secondary school and then, wow, okay, so that must have been tricky.
Yeah, it was a very different opinion in my opinion. It was very fun, engaging on Zoom, but for a business perspective, you don't have the culture, like the business culture, after work beers, stuff like that.
yeah, you miss all of that, and just that everything has to be scheduled, doesn't it, when you're at home? Whereas like in an office, when you're around people, you can go, oh, this great opportunity's just come in. Let's go dive in a room and just quickly get our heads together on how's best to respond to it. Whereas on Zoom or on Teams or whatever you're using, you're like, oh, okay, who's free to jump on a call and then wait for people to respond? Or, okay, I'm going to book it for 4:00 today. And you lose that.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, Becky. And I know that you guys have got quite flexible, working where you have a lot of people in the office. And I remember when I was more predominantly working from home, even as the pandemic was kind of breaking up through phases, that people were very regimented with their time. There was slots. And I found myself not working less hours. I found myself working more intensively in blocks. The ability just to tap people on the shoulder and say, have you got 10 minutes? Can we just pull together on this problem? And that's the thing I love about the office, because I come into London, I come into the office probably 50% of my time. Some weeks it's 2 out of 5 days, some days it's 3. And I deliberately try to keep a free calendar where possible. There's always going to be a few meetings so that I can actually spontaneously just use the day however I think it's needed. And I think working independently from home more, I find those days are a little bit more rigid. So I very much enjoy the kind of collaborative approach that offices provide.
Yeah, and just that ability to just tap someone on the shoulder or to spot someone they look a bit stressed. I'm going to go and see, can I make them a cuppa? Can I help them? Like all those things that when everyone's in their own individual homes, you've got no way of knowing those things or seeing those things. Whereas, at school, your teacher will know, well, Zachary looks more stressed today. I wonder if I can help him. If you're just at home, no one knows that. They don't see that.
Especially when you can turn off your Zoom cameras.
Yes.
You can't tell who's there, who is it.
Yeah. I don't like talking to just cameras without people on them. I want faces.
Yeah, I don't know what you find with your clients, Becky, but we have some that clearly have policies where they're on, and the expectation is, whether it's an internal or external meeting, cameras are on, and I think there's a certain level of attentive standards and so forth. We have an agency policy where if we're dialing in, we should be presenting our best selves. Cameras are on. We've helped the team as well get good setups with microphones. We've actually had some remote training from, I think it's Body Talk UK, about how to sit, posture, how to frame yourself, making sure that the background's not too messy. But, we do have some clients that don't have those policies, and often we'll be having meetings with those clients and all of their cameras are off. And it's very difficult to judge the room and what's going on. Yeah,
I see that as well. We're very much cameras on policy, and you're just talking to nobody. Well, I suppose it's like a telephone conversation in that sense, but because you're giving yourself up on camera, you're like, come on, this is fair exchange. We should be seeing each other. It's a bit of a weird situation.
Yeah. There's no human connection in it.
Yeah.
Just through tone of voice.
You lose that ability to read their body and see are they happy, engaged, or are they sitting there doing their emails and not really paying attention? And then when you say, "Oh, James," and you're like, "Well, what was the question?"
Yeah, no, it happens. I've seen people caught out on both sides. I've seen instances of people forgetting that they haven't muted or left their camera on and wandering off and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I think one of the worst things or most risky things I've seen recently are AI note takers that are also joining a lot of meetings that we do both internally and externally with clients. I've heard a few horror stories of, people sort of leaving these AI note takers on and people leaving the call, or people on a call prematurely before others arrive, having conversations, forgetting that the transcripts can be emailed to all the participants. So thankfully there haven't been any cases in our team that
but I've heard the same. Yeah, especially the kind of end of call, because we'd often, like, you've got a call with a client and then the client leaves and it's like, well, let's stay on and we can debrief. And it's like, remember to kick that note taker out, because otherwise that debrief is there for them to see.
Exactly.
Which is not necessarily, especially if it wasn't the best debrief, the client wasn't as we expected them to be or whatever. So you end up starting this business. Well, Andy's kind of got the footings going, and you've joined a couple of months in. And was that always going to be performance marketing, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. The name of our agency, Strategic, was always to add that layer that was missing at the time, perhaps from our previous experience of building digital mediums like websites or ads or advertising, kind of rather than just doing it for the sake of it, doing it for a purpose, knowing and understanding what our clients' business objectives, what their needs are, having and working together on a strategy. So Strategic was strategy with intelligence, sort of like strategy IQ, which is how some people incorrectly pronounce our agency name. And it was always right from the outset set up to be both sort of what we call like production, which could be anything creative around video, websites, design, anything kind of creative. And then we had the performance marketing side alongside that. So Andy and I both come from a sort of quite extensive background of SEO, pay-per-click, and really the organization was formed in those two areas. So in the very early stages, I was heading up all of production. So all websites, creative, digital projects, like the one-off projects that were moving through the agency, I would oversee, sell a lot of them, and work with the team to deliver those. And Andy would work as a sort of counterpart in the ongoing services, so the marketing and the delivery of performance marketing for those clients in the early stages. So that was originally how the kind of company was structured into sort of like two pods when we started to have the sort of first half a dozen team members.
Fantastic. And how did you win your first clients? Because I don't know about you, but I remember I used to start every meeting with, so we're only 6 months old, or I felt like I kept apologizing for being new and fresh and not having lots of case studies to show. And how did you get started?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And some of the clients that I even work with today, I've actually been working with for nearly 20 years.
Wow.
Because they've grown their businesses as I've kind of grown my career and my expertise. So in the very early stages of my sort of first role, we would go out and work with and meet businesses and brands. One of my favorite ones that comes to mind is the company Discovery Tours Limited. They're based here in London, and they do Jack the Ripper tours, treasure hunts and things. And it was a very small business 15 years ago or so. And I worked with and built a relationship with the founder, Richard Jones, who's also a very well-known historian. He's on all sorts of Netflix shows and things. And we just really kind of hit it off in the sense that the website that we built for him and his business, the advice that we gave on marketing, how to get found in search engines, and all the way through my career, obviously, if you change agency, there can be a bit of a cooling off period where you don't solicit and you can't solicit clients from your previous role into your new role. But what both Andy and I found as Strategic setup is that clients and relationships that we'd built in our previous role were naturally gravitating and wanting to come and work with us. And I remember sitting down with Andy when I was joining Strategic, and we were sort of trying to work out how do we keep the momentum of the growth going? What clients could you maybe bring to the table, James? And I had to be very clear to say, well, out of respect to the previous agency, there's, sort of 6-12 months of non-solicitation where I can't just go advertising to them and say, I'm over here now, would you like to come work with me? But what I found soon after that period was over was that probably about a dozen partners, clients, brands that I had previously worked with were sort of very curious as to what I was doing now. They wanted to bring their performance marketing strategies, their design work over to work with me because I'd built that relationship, I'd earned that trust, and I'd had previous success in working with them. And as mentioned, one of the the brands that, I work with, we built their, or should I say, I built their very first e-commerce platform. They were a high street showroom, and really they were sort of seeing that the shift was going digital. And I sort of helped take that sort of retail store into the online space, built their first e-commerce platform, built 2 or 3 iterations. And even now, even though the founder of that business has since sold the business and retired, the leadership team who now own and operate this business that turns over tens of millions a year online now work with us as an agency partner. They love and enjoy the history that perhaps I and our agency has with that business, that they just trust the knowledge and the roadmap that we're working on together. So doing a great job and building those relationships early on has really been the foundations of making strategic successful. Yeah,
shows the importance of network and building those relationships with people. It's brilliant. That's so good. So you didn't necessarily have as many kind of sitting there cold conversations to begin with? There was warmer people coming?
Yeah, I mean, there were some back in those early stages. And with Andy's background in sales, he's never been afraid to, pick up the phone, to go to network business events and just having conversations with people. Yeah. And often some of the best routes to working with brands is to network and is to sort of really shout about what you do. Because if I think of some of the brands that we work with today, they haven't just filled out our website form or just randomly chosen us to be part of a tendering process for a pitch. They've come to us because they've either had a recommendation or we've just had really great conversations. There's a pitch that we're going to be working on for later this week where a recruitment company who has been supplying candidates for us has sort of almost got so embedded in what we do as an agency that when they heard another business they were working for were looking for a marketing partner, they were like, we should, connect you guys with strategic and put you guys together. So, reputation and building those relationships with everybody is really key. And, even getting out there at events. I'm naturally introverted. As I mentioned earlier, I've sort of developed a lot of skills working in hospitality to speak to people, but I'm in my happy place with my headphones on, working, doing things. But if you kind of put yourself out there and build relationships and network or share your knowledge as a speaker at an industry event, you can find that people are attracted to the approach that you've taken or the results that you've had for a brand. And again, some of the clients that we're with today, they have seen either myself or one of my colleagues on stage describing a problem, describing the route that we've maybe taken with the marketing strategy to overcome that problem and get results, and then said, well, maybe we should go and speak to those guys because that's a problem that we have and they've clearly got a track record in solving it. So there's so many different routes to growing a business, building relationships with clients, winning pitches. There's not really any one in particular that I would say that has been the primary kind of cause in the growth of our agency. It's probably been a little bit of everything.
Bit of everything indeed, yeah. And so as a self-confessed introvert then, how do you push yourself to go and do those things? Because I think a lot of introverts might be listening to this thinking, you ain't getting me on stage, I'm not going to talk. Like that feels like a big leap from feeling that that's where you are.
And I think anybody watching the video with us today, I may not come across as introverted sitting here talking to you guys, but I really am. I'm the type of person that I'll be at a conference, I'll be talking to people, networking, and then I'll just go outside for 10 minutes and just kind of like, and relax and kind of bring myself back down to a level. Some people charge their battery by talking, having conversations, and often I can find that quite tiring. And, I do a lot of traveling where I go abroad to go and spend time with our clients, and often the sort of the elements after the meetings where you maybe go out, have something to eat, have a drink, they can almost be a bit of an expectation. So for me, it's best to start small. It's something that I started to take steps in unknowingly in weekend jobs or evening jobs when I was a student, to sort of start to develop those kind of more confident approaches to speaking with people. So even before I worked in a restaurant as a student, I actually worked in a shop that sold tropical fish.
As you do.
That was my hobby.
Love it.
As a young teenager, my grandmother got me into it. She bought me my first fish tank, and I'm talking, this like whacking great big 6-foot tank. And, I had to develop a bit of an understanding as to what fish go with each other. And then there was an aquarium just in the village over from mine, because I live in a very rural area in the centre of England. There was a Saturday job open. I'd have worked there for free, to be honest with you. I was so interested in catching these fish and helping people, that I used to get a bit of a kick out of people asking for my expertise about these fish. And they'd be very surprised to hear that this 16-year-old could actually, describe how to look after certain fish. And that's one of the early ways that I kind of developed or sort of gained enjoyment out of speaking to people, was through expertise. And that's really carried through for me today, because even though I'm naturally introverted, if people were to sort of talk to me today and say, right, what's your take on how AI is changing the search landscape? I'm so interested in it. I want to share my thoughts and opinion, that I find it comfortable to talk about things, because I've got that level of expertise and that confidence in what I know, my opinion, and I love having that kind of dialogue. So my advice to anybody that perhaps feels a little bit introverted or not wanting to necessarily speak to people in marketing and advertising, it is a part of the job. And there are people in our teams who have less interaction with clients, with colleagues than others. But if you're doing something that you enjoy and you have that level of expertise in what you're doing, I think it's a lot more easier to come out of your shell a little bit and talk to people about it.
I love that. I love the story of your love of tropical fish. And actually, because sometimes trying to marry something you're already passionate about with something that feels a bit scary and daunting, it makes it much easier, because you're like, actually, this feels quite natural now, as opposed to, I don't know, if you'd gone and started trying to sell something or work somewhere where you had no interest in it whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I tried a whole variety of jobs, when I was a student, and we've all tried things, right, where there's some things that just don't really feel right. And I've always naturally been interested in tech. I was very fortunate that our family could afford to have a PC back in the day when not every home had a computer in it, and I was just stuck on this thing. Similar to the sort of challenges that I think the younger generation have today with screen time. I certainly had a problem with screen time when we had a PC and we had to plug it into the internet, which meant the phone line would go offline through 56K. But that's how I really learnt digital. It's how I learnt to to type. It's how I learnt to design things. And I think from sort of my perspective, doing what you enjoy and being passionate about it, the softer skills like communication and collaboration tend to come a lot easier when you're doing something you love.
Just a quick note from me. We'd love you to hit the subscribe button. This helps us more than you might realise when it comes to growing this podcast, ensuring we can bring you the best guests possible. Thank you. Back to the episode.
And so you want to get into marketing, is this right?
Yeah, I want to get into marketing.
Great.
Would you advise certain things? Like, I know you mentioned you did coding, or like the university course that you did. Would you advise doing both or something different?
Yeah, I mean, if we start with the sort of education route, I certainly don't want to say today you should absolutely, do a university degree or, a college course or not. I think they work differently for different people. When I was a student, I'll quite happily admit, I was still enjoying being young. I wasn't really so focused and mature that I was thinking about 5 or 10 years ahead. I enjoyed graphic design. I enjoyed digital. I was starting to experiment and make things for sort of friends and family. So an aunt of mine ran a hotel, and I'd make a logo for her. I was working with her on, that sort of first website. So even as I was learning academically, I was also developing skills concurrently, just doing little freelance projects, some of them unpaid, some of them for, a little bit of money. And what worked for me with university, I think, was just being part of a group of people all learning at the same time. So when we were learning certain things like coding, or we were doing things like desktop publishing, like how you physically design for and make books, which I thought was fascinating. We were all sort of doing it together. And I would say, whilst I was at university studying design, the lecturers were fabulous. I learned a lot, but a lot of my actual learning and what prepared me for industry was how I applied myself with those projects. It was the time that I put in my sort of project work, collaborating and getting a group of people together. I was like, right, that guy's really good at design. That girl there in my class, she's very, very good at communication and messaging and writing. So I'll make a project team with those three. So university, higher education gives you a platform, it gives you access to lecturers and people that have got industry knowledge. But I always think it's how you apply in the marketing, creative and tech world. It's how you apply yourself. And if you enjoy it, you'll go out of your way to find and develop those things. The education route isn't a surefire success way, a vehicle you just get in and it takes you there. You have to drive it yourself, I found. And some of the best people that I've worked with, some of the people on our team now who are incredibly successful, they didn't do anything after GCSEs. They sort of fell into sort of executive or junior roles, then they taught themselves in those early stages. But for me, I think if somebody like yourself, Zachary, is looking to get into marketing, whether it's advertising, creative or tech, there's a lot of questions at the moment about what that's going to look like in the years to come. What role will AI have, in the same way it is with many industries, many white collar jobs. But I think fundamentally it's working out what you're passionate about. And if you're naturally finding yourself exploring that route, exploring that sort of expertise in your own time, then you know that I think you're onto the right thing. So as I say, I could give you examples and success stories of people who have gone down any route, university, college, or straight into industry and apprenticeships. Everyone has got an opportunity, I think, to find a really great path and a really great career.
Yeah. So applying a good work ethic will allow me to get the jobs that I want.
Yeah. And have you had to think yet about what sort of area of marketing that you'd like to specialise in?
I'm not entirely sure, but like probably a more digital approach, like getting the photos, like enhancing them,
Great.
adding the taglines, all of that.
Great. And are you a keen photographer now yourself?
Well, I'm a good photographer, but I don't constantly take pictures.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I love photography as well. I've got a camera. It's fascinating these days how smartphones have got such good cameras on. You can take really great pictures, work with those. I think there's still a gap of quality between the two of them. But my advice to you would be is if you're curious about that sector and the way that images are still going to be a very visual part of everything that we do moving forward. And I think there are incredible advances with generative AI, with what you can do with images and how you can generate images. But I still believe it's knowing what image to create in the first place, whether you're looking through a camera lens or you're prompting AI to create something. That creativity, I think, will always remain and be led by human thinking as opposed to machines. So, my advice would be to sort of play around with it, whether you're just experimenting as part of your courses, with your A-levels, and if you go on to do something else. But, keep your ears open for things that friends and family might be looking for, and sort of, I'll pick that up for you if you're looking for a graphic to be made or, a picture, because that's often where the best results can come, because you're creating something for someone else. Therefore, there's a little bit of a pressure to show them what you can do. And then that's, it's almost like the equivalent of work industry. When clients are paying you to deliver something, you have to really put your best foot forward with what you're doing. So getting that sort of self-initiated work progressed concurrently to what you're maybe, learning in education, I think is, it's certainly what I did, and it's what I found interesting. And kind of really helped me, because then when I was at university and talking to lecturers and teachers and things, and they thought they were showing us something for the first time, I'd say, oh, I've already played around with Photoshop. I've got that on my computer at home, albeit I think it was a pirate copy at the time. But nevertheless, it sort of gave me the ability to sort of understand the language and the environment to really hit the ground running when the teachers were sort of sharing with us their expertise.
Yeah, and like experimenting with different websites like Photoshop, you said.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of tools out there at the moment, and there's so many different things that you can do and try. And I think one of the great things with the introduction of AI over the last kind of couple of years is the ability to explore and try more things. And if you've got something creative, whether it's a campaign or you're trying to work on a storyboard, the process of maybe how you might get to the end result now might be made a little bit more efficient, but the creative process of getting to that idea is still there. And I think that tools like Photoshop or even ChatGPT, it just gives people more access to create ideas and take things to market a lot quicker.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because we are so surrounded by marketing. Like every time you pick up your phone or your computer, you're being marketed to wherever you go on the internet, but also just around you. So it's actually starting to try and digest what do you like about what other people are doing and who do you think it was targeted at. And I think there's such an opportunity just to kind of have a brain on and a thought on what's going on around us. And actually things like we're here at the Drum today. The Drum is brilliant they'll talk about Nike's big new launch or whatever's going on. So you can also then pair it up with things you're interested in, but actually being interested in what's happening in the industry and what brands are doing. Even if they're not the brands you want to end up working with, it kind of starts to make you think, oh, there's a lot of thought that goes into that, because most of the time we see marketing and no one's thinking about what happened behind the scenes to get that message to be in front of me as it is right now. But actually you can turn that on as being quite focused on it and thinking about, what did I like about it? What didn't I like? So yeah.
Are there any brands out there, Zachary, that sort of speak to you whose marketing, advertising, sort of resonates with you?
Well, I'd say clothing brands, like the way they position the characters, where you have them higher up from you, looking directly at you, trying to gauge your attention, like how they wear their clothes, how they act in them. It gives standards and stereotypes of what this brand is like.
Yeah, it's all deliberate, isn't it?
Yeah.
And some of it can look so natural, aspirational. If you look at the Nike website or some of the brands we work with, like Gore-Tex, they're very deliberately trying to show you the product, the technology, or the fashion in such a way that you can see it for its sort of merits. If it's got sort of particular properties about it, or if it's just the aesthetic and the lifestyle that product brings and creates. All that requires thought, alignment to brand, tone of voice. We often fashion, I think, is one of the things that we all find easy to assign ourselves to. To have an affiliation with brands that we like and respect. And I think it's sort of being part of that brand that I think a marketer's job is to sort of try and to get people to connect with.
Yeah.
How about you, Becky?
What brands that I like? I feel like I've gone blank of any brands out there. I feel my social feed. Do you know what? I feel like I'm full of influencers in my social feed, and actually, I think they went through this almost slightly dirty phase of influencers where it felt very unauthentic, and you were just like, this person's just selling this thing. Whereas actually, if I think at the moment, my Instagram feed is full of people doing houses up. Not that we're doing our house up, but I feel like I'm always interested in design and what people have done with their spaces. And actually, it's so natural and beautiful how it happens a lot of the time. And I think that's when people are doing it really well, that you do recognize the brands and they're there, but you're also becoming more in a relationship with everything about that brand and the people around that brand. And I don't know, marketing has changed quite a lot. And I think that's where I don't know. Yeah, I spend probably most of my time on Instagram if I was scrolling, and it is that more influencer-led content where it's not necessarily celebs, it's everyday people like us, and you kind of get interested in how they're interacting with different brands.
Yeah, and I think going back to your point as well about having one eye on the industry, just seeing what other people are doing. This isn't something necessarily I used to do a lot of, but what I find myself doing at the moment is just taking time in my working week. I'm very disciplined at the weekends. Once I, sort of check out, if you like, on a Friday, I tend to leave my inbox to one side. I'll very rarely, and this is a culture we have at our agency, work over the weekend unless there's a really important pitch or presentation or something coming up. I like to have that separation. But in the working week, so for example, on the train ride I had into London today, as much as my inbox is calling me and, trying to grab my attention, and I've got colleagues talking to me on Slack, I make time, particularly on a Monday morning, to actually just look at what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah.
Because as part of my role as the Chief Product Officer at Strategic, I have to make sure that our products, our services are on point, that they suit the needs of what our clients are looking for. So what I tend to do is go, right, well, what brands out there are doing these incredible campaigns that are winning awards and capturing the imagination of their target audiences? What shifts are we seeing in markets or with tech, for example? Is there a new emerging content management system that could, rival WordPress or Shopify in the e-commerce space? These are all questions that I don't have to necessarily know the answer to all of them, but I try and stimulate this culture in our agency of sort of looking at what's going on in the outside world. It's very easy, I think, to get caught up in a bubble. And, you can subscribe to emails, you can follow brands and, award bodies and things like the Drum, who I spend a lot of time reading their content just to get a feel for what's kind of going on. And you could spend all week, right, trying to consume content, because there is more content out there than you can possibly, read in the week. But just picking out some of those key stories and then being able to connect them when you want to reference or back something up that you're proposing. And, one of the most interesting things that a couple of my clients do with me quite regularly is when I meet up with them, particularly if I've not seen them for a few weeks, is before we sit down and we might be having a coffee, they'll say to me, what's new? Tell me. What don't I know? And, they word it and position it in different ways. And in some ways it's it's a little bit of an icebreaker. It's a little bit of a sort of test. But ultimately, a few of our clients say, what's going on right now in the brand performance space that maybe we don't know about, that might influence what we're doing. Tell me something that could be really interesting. And from my perspective, it can be quite daunting, the prospect of going and see a client when they're going to spring that on you. But really having a sort of finger on the pulse in the background to just see what brands are, what are doing, how they're reaching their audiences, or what's changing in the tech space, I find incredibly valuable. So valuable that I found a few months ago there was quite a few different stories that were breaking, in our industry, that I gathered them all together, put them into a 10-slide deck, presented them in our weekly all hands meeting. And it was so valuable to them. I almost made a rod for my own back, because now I do that every week. And there's that little bit of expectation now that, James knows what's going on. He'll gather up a few things. But the fact that that's now a formalized thing in our agency is great, because it creates conversation, and it also makes sure that I stick to the process I want each week. It might be on a Wednesday getting on my exercise bike, but certainly on a Monday morning, it's looking at what's going on in the industry.
I need to get myself a copy of that weekly deck. Is that for friends as well?
Yeah, it can be, absolutely. Usually I just pick out about 6 different stories, and I try and spread it out across, creative, tech, performance marketing, because, some of my specific personal preferences, rather than me being a completely broad marketer, I really do like my kind of background in design and tech, but I've got a real affinity for performance marketing. So, SEO, paid search, and how the kind of landscape's changing at the moment, I find quite fascinating. And that's what a lot of our brands are asking us about. So they're saying to us at the moment, well, I'm using ChatGPT to do most of my searches now. That means all of our customers must be. What does that mean? So sort of keeping an eye on what's happening and changing, I find fascinating, because like going back to working in that tropical fish shop, if you've got the answers to some of these questions and can have commentary on it, then it kind of makes you sticky as a marketing partner.
Are Duolingo, Nike, and McDonald's some of your favorite brands? For all the latest marketing and brand news, follow the Drum Mag on Instagram.
And what are your views on how search is changing? I mean, we could do a whole podcast on this alone.
Yeah, we could. And it's a really interesting subject at the moment, because I think, I know Google's been pretty much a monopoly in all of our lives in the way that we search. Globally, they've got a 90% market share on search. It's very dominant, and it's almost 3 years ago that OpenAI's ChatGPT sprung to life. They've got that first mover advantage that brands can often have with new technology. ChatGPT, like Google, has become, it's almost like a verb. Did you ChatGPT that? Did you Google that? So, my take on it is things are changing. We know that there's a huge shift of people using platforms. And I referenced ChatGPT because they've pretty much got 80% of the generative AI chatbot space. Even like Google's Gemini, they've only got like sort of 5-6% after that. And, we're sort of tempering enthusiasm at the moment, because I think out of all the different searches that are going on, OpenAI released some data. They did a sort of study with Harvard just a few months ago, and it kind of showed how people are actually using the platform and searching. There's only about 30% of queries people are putting in there that would actually overlap with what you sort of traditionally put into Google. And even at the moment that the number of people that are using the platform is kind of growing, quite a rate, it's still very, very small. I think in August there was about 6 billion uses on ChatGPT globally. And when you compare that to Google, I think it was about 85 billion. You can sort of start to put together that, that sort of size difference in how people are using these platforms. Most of the referrals that our clients are getting from ChatGPT versus Google, it's less than 1%, but it is really ramping up at a sort of 45-degree angle. And I can see a chart that's almost burned on the back of my eyes that I was looking at this morning where we're presenting this. Additionally, OpenAI are saying, well, we might actually bring advertising to the platform. They've brought shopping into the platform, and they've just recently released, agentic commerce where you can buy within the platform without ever having to leave the platform. And I think what we'll see is ChatGPT starting to bring in advertising, allowing people to sort of feature more prominently. And then we know conversely, Google are trying to modify their user interface to sort of more closely match that generative chat conversational approach. So I think the two platforms are going to look and feel quite similar as they sort of meet this kind of middle section. Whether ChatGPT will take a much bigger bite out of Google's market share, remains to be seen.
Yeah.
So we're seeing change, but from my perspective, the marketing tactics and approaches that we're advising our clients on will benefit or should benefit both traditional SEO search as well as give visibility in the paradigm shift around generative AI search.
Yeah, I've just written a talk on this for Brighton SEO later this week, actually.
Yes.
And the conclusion, and I can say that because this will go out after the talk happens, but the conclusion of the talk is it's the same stuff. Actually, Google's had this guiding principle around EEAT, so expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trust for many years now, haven't they? I couldn't even put a number of years on it.
Yeah, it's been some time.
But that's all still just what good brands should be doing anyway, is demonstrating those things. And actually that is going to absolutely help you show up in your ChatGPT, LLM type space as well. So yeah, it's really exciting. When we're talking about this from a search perspective, is there anything you've been learning at school that starts to touch on that as a marketing stream of thinking about SEO and paid media? Or are you like, this is...
Yeah, the more wanting us to use AI for a learning perspective, like say you don't understand the graph in economics, I'll Google it, ChatGPT it, and then it will give me an answer. Then if I want more help, I can ask the teacher or continue with the AI.
Yeah, but you've not been learning about, from a marketing perspective, thinking about how these platforms, because it's so interesting, isn't it? And I think there's this space isn't going anywhere. I think it's just going to get bigger. It's
just going to get bigger. And the beauty of it is everyone's learning at the same time. There are no individuals or agencies who have got 10, 20 years experience like you have in more traditional marketing channels. But AI marketing, it is becoming an increasingly big platform with bigger audiences. And, this is what our clients are asking us. This is what we're seeing in RFPs, requests for proposals that come through to our agencies, where people are looking for our support, guidance and services. And there's a very big one we've just completed, which will hopefully win, where the entire nucleus of this new website project revolves around serving up this brand to large language models, ensuring that all their information, their content, their troubleshooting guides can all be consumed and understood, so that their brand can be visible for people performing research in AI.
Because the thing is, it's flipping it. I was having a conversation the other day with someone from UK TV. We were doing a roundtable, and at the start of the roundtable, we'd done this kind of go round and what's your most interesting use of AI at the moment? It can be personal or work. And someone on the roundtable had said, I've been using ChatGPT to work out what to watch next. So like when I've finished a series on Netflix, I go to ChatGPT and say, I like this kind of thing normally. And obviously it gets to know you over time. So it goes, you should definitely watch this next. And then I had a penny drop moment later on in the conversation with the UK TV person of, at the moment, for a lot of websites like that, the thinking behind what gets served up to you, and I say websites, more like the apps and platforms that we consume TV on, if you've just finished X series and then it's going to suggest what to do next, the algorithm powering that is hidden behind the scenes. We don't see it. An AI can't see it at the moment. It's in their own little walled garden. But actually, if people are going to start not asking Netflix, tell me what to watch next, and instead go series finished, jump to ChatGPT, we've got to help ChatGPT to understand, how would Netflix decide what to watch next? And suddenly, actually, a lot of the content that you might have that's proprietary and hidden behind things and is part of how you inform customers, if they're not going to ask you to inform them anymore, they're asking their assistants and whatnot, that are these virtual tools, you need to get that information out into the world for those tools. So we're at such an exciting time that lots is going to be changing. It's a really exciting space to think about. And the advertising piece in there, as you say, I was chatting to someone the other day that said ChatGPT has had ads out for paid media people. So it is. That's
right. In terms of the recruitment ads. Yeah, I saw that too. So I think Sam Altman back in the summer said his position on going absolutely not, no advertising, a bit like what Mark Zuckerberg said in the early days of Facebook. He'd soften that approach. And then, as you say, there was some positions open, some recruitment that they'd found open for, for sort of paid advertising. So the signs are starting to point towards that will indeed become a thing. And obviously, some of our brands who are noticing that their audiences are researching their products or services on ChatGPT are saying, well, will we eventually be able to kind of advertise and, make sure that our brands are found and discovered? And, the answer at the moment is maybe.
We hope so. We don't know. But suddenly also you think the minute that launches, anyone that works in paid media that's used to using Google and Meta and Facebook, Instagram, etc., has suddenly got this whole new platform to get their heads around of how does that work? And I guess working in the digital space, it's just constant change, isn't it? Having to be ready for it.
It is. But that's what I find exciting about it. It's why I love, marketing, and why I didn't choose to work in something like law, because as much as law probably moves and evolves, I don't think it's quite as exciting and doesn't necessarily move and change at a pace that I think advertising and marketing does. And what's really exciting at the moment, I think, in our space, particularly with digital advertising, is the sort of the titans and the routes that people would traditionally take to sort of reach audiences, like with Google Ads, may look very different as early as next year. We've got a lot of brands now talking more to us about marketing on and advertising on Reddit.
Yes.
Because of Reddit's growth and
Same
size.
here, yeah.
And if you think about their platform being based almost it's pretty much entirely on human-based content expertise, solving problems, then, it would make sense that if there are big discussions going on about particular brands or services, that people would want to advertise on there. So it does feel like things are changing, and I think change brings opportunity for people who move and respond quickly. And again, I think back to the world of, agency life, are we adding those valuable partnerships for our clients? Are they telling us to go and advertise on that platform? Or are we bringing those initiatives to the table because we've got the finger on the pulse and we're working with other clients on that?
Yeah. And I suppose back to Zachary's first question, he was asking about how do you find yourself in a position that you're a co-owner of a company. Did you, when you were Zachary's age, did you think you were going to run your own business? Was that in your vision, or hadn't really considered it?
Yeah, it's a great question, because all I knew I wanted to do when I was a student was enjoy what I did. And, I was the type of kid that was, like drawing and designing my own magazines and sticking them together with sellotape, just drawing them with pencil on sugar paper. I can see them now in my mind's eye. And, eventually that evolved into things, on computers. And I always said to myself, as long as I'm designing, as long as I'm, creating things and putting them in front of people and delighting people with that, that's what I want to do. And I think it was my sort of first year of university. I was enjoying student university life. I was with my friends, and there was several modules which I just flew straight through, which I loved and enjoyed. I wasn't really putting much effort in, but I was like, okay, great, they're done. There was one module that I failed and I had to redo it over the summer of the first year. And that was almost my wake-up call, which was, this sort of bubble of not having any responsibility is eventually going to sort of not pop, but require some serious thought, planning, consideration. And then as I went into year two, having spent my summer reworking and redoing this project and not even being sure if I was going to, pass the only second attempt I could have at it, I really buckled down and thought, well, what is it that I want to do? Where do I want to go? And it was at that time I started to more apply my digital skills, continue my sort of self-training development into website development and e-commerce. And my intention in the sort of stages of my education was, yes, I want to go and work for an agency because I want to be around people that I can learn from. I've always had that sort of drive to work with and learn from other people. I would say that I was probably 2 years into industry when I remember thinking to myself, might be quite nice one day to co-own and run an agency and sort of lead, as much as I love doing. And I spent all of my 20s pretty much doing the doing and enjoying that. That's when I think that kind of light switched on to think, well, actually, to be able to have the level of experience that I can create things through teams and through people was then starting to become really exciting. But I think I knew at the time, in order to lead and inspire and, kind of conceive these campaigns or approaches, I'd have to have maybe gained some experience in doing it, not necessarily out of an ability people will then follow me, but just so that I know what works, what doesn't work, and how to communicate to people. Because, in my experience, you work with a creative in a very different way to how you might work with a developer. They've got very different drivers and motivators, personalities, and personalities that you have to sort of evolve and adapt into. So I think I've always subconsciously known I've wanted to work in agency life. I've always had that drive, but the route to sort of co-owning an agency, as much as that comes with, benefits and, things that I love, it also comes with a lot of responsibility because, going back to the pandemic, when that hit, we had some clients saying to us, wow, this is amazing. Our e-commerce business is flying because people are at home and they're buying our stuff. We had some other businesses saying, we've gone bust. Or we had some businesses saying, we're not going to pay you for the foreseeable because we don't know what's going on. And all the while, you've got a whole team of people there looking at you as their boss to, make sure that you can pay them at the end of the month and pay their mortgages. So the sort of realities of running an agency when things are going great, the benefits can be amazing and it's such a rewarding feeling, but it's very much flanked with the responsibilities and the kind of late nights with spreadsheets and accountants and making sure that actually everything's running smoothly in the background. So often people can present themselves on Instagram and even LinkedIn from the business world as that sort of swan gliding on the surface, but there's always those feet underneath
paddling away
and protecting
crazily,
the team, paddling away. But I wouldn't do anything different. It's been an exciting journey to this point, and the industry is very different to the industry it was when I sort of first entered it 20 years ago or so. But
it's mad to think where it'll be in another 20 years, isn't it? Like, I find it hard to predict. I just think we're on such a change at the moment. It's so exciting to be front and center to see what's going on. Yeah. What other questions? What haven't we answered for you, Zachary?
I think you've answered them all and more. You've shown me what it's like to be as a leader in a company. How you got there. You've told me like the differences between education. Like, you've explained everything really well.
Yeah. Great. Feeling excited to go and see what you do next. And because you're year 12, so you've got this year and next year, and then I suppose this year's probably a key year for shaping what comes next. You're going to come to our Aspiration Digital event.
Yeah, I will.
And actually, James, you should come and speak at our Aspiration Digital event. You'd be very good.
Yeah, I'd be happy
very
to.
Good.
If you'll have me, no problem at all.
And we will get you some info over about that.
Great,
Amy's nodding at me in the corner. She's going to follow up because I think you've got loads to say. Is there anything you think we've not touched on that you're like, oh, actually, this was a pivotal thing or a key moment or something surprising, something that Zachary should know before we finish?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the thing to always think about is everyone's always continually learning. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to get things wrong. I've some of the biggest lessons I've had to learn in my career have come, they come quite consistently. And, I'll share a story that, the moment I probably took the most learning from in my whole career it was very early on in the days of strategic. And even though I'd probably got about 12 years industry under my belt, I felt like a very confident, proficient marketer, web developer. We took on a very complex project. At the same time, there was a sort of new technology available. And this is, it's a good example of maybe not having the full rounded skill set that maybe I thought I had, whilst I might have been a very good developer writing code and working with a UX designer. This was at an early stage where project management, for example, in our agency was still in its infancy. And it was something that was sort of done by everybody rather than a specific role, which we have in the agency today. And I think my desire, I've got this innate desire to always say yes to people. Will you come and speak on a podcast? Yes, Becky, of course I will. No problem. My friends will say to me, you should come for a beer at the weekend. Yes, of course, I'd love to. Even though I'm a bit tired and wiped out. I love saying yes. I love pleasing people. I love giving people what they've, maybe what they've paid for, what they've asked for. And one of the downsides that I learned in my early 30s is that can actually have a detrimental effect on maybe the work that you're doing. So, there's a project we did, and the scope that we put together this kind of platform with was pretty robust. And then as the project kind of kicked off and we were getting underway with it with a new technology, the client was eager and excited to add more things to it. Mm-hmm. And as we went along, it's like, yes, of course we could do that. That's a great idea. We'll put that piece on. And that kind of snowballed. And I think over the sort of 6 months of the project, it really turned into something quite unrecognizable, to the point where had we been asked to create that in the first instance, we would have advised not to. It would have, made sense to have maybe done it a different way or done it in stages. And at the end of that process, I slowly started to realize that, a bit like the game Buckaroo, where you put all the things on the donkey before it kicks over. It was almost like I hadn't realized until sort of we were too far into it that, we were going down a bit of a road where we were stacking all these things on top of something that wasn't in the best possible way. And it was all because the team and I were just saying yes to everything, and we weren't pushing back. We weren't advising. We weren't using our expertise to say, well, actually, no, we wouldn't recommend doing that. Let's get this first iteration done, live, tested, and then we can look at those things, because that scope creep pushed us over time. It pushed us over budget. And it also meant that the output at the end was suboptimal compared to what we were being asked of. And, the one advice that I'd give to anybody going into marketing, creative or digital is to know and acknowledge that it's a continual learning process, whether it's learning how to engage and manage clients or master the craft of creativity or coding or Google Ads, whatever it is. You're always learning. Things are always changing, and that's okay. And if you develop an expertise, it's a case of not being afraid to say when you think something's in a good place or is in danger of going off onto a different tangent. And that was, I think, a lesson that I learned a little bit too, a little bit longer into my career than perhaps I should have.
I'm smiling as you say all of that, because I've been on the exact same journey. I'm a definite people pleaser.
Yes.
I love to say yes as well. And similar projects in our history. I think a lot of people that go to run agencies are people pleasers because it's such a people related business. I think there's probably a cluster of us, and clients lose out because they keep pushing and you keep saying yes, and until you've learned that when to say no and when to bring your strategic mindset, which
Indeed.
You guys definitely have, but when you're in that infancy of growing your business, it's really hard, isn't it?
It is, but we're blessed to do what we enjoy.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine doing anything else, anything different. And any of my friends that are in different industries, any that have been successful, and I don't judge success in terms of, monetary rewards or, prestige or anything. The one consistency with people that I know in the industry and some of my friends that have done well is they work hard, they enjoy what they do. And I think to anybody like yourself, Zachary, if you get excited thinking about marketing, advertising, and anything that sits in between that, then follow that, because if you're enjoying what you do, you'll become good at it, you'll become passionate about it, and then you'll find yourself in positions like mine and Becky where you're almost sport for choice with how to spend your time, with so much that goes on, because it's an incredibly collaborative industry. The knowledge sharing is fantastic. It's constantly changing, and that's just one of the things that I find exciting about it. And if I catch up with my friends at the weekend and they say, what's your week been like this week, they always ask me that, because they know that they're going to get a very different answer each week. And rather than me going, oh, you won't believe what happened with this, that and the other, I'm always leading on the front foot with animated positives and things that that I'm proud of. And I don't think a week goes by where I haven't got something that I can be excited about, that I can tell my kids about, or I can tell my friends about on a Friday night.
There's just always stories, isn't there? It's such a fun place to work. I love it. Love it. Yeah. Are you excited now?
Yeah, I'm so excited. It just makes me want to go into the industry sooner.
Well, it will come around like there's no tomorrow, and then you'll be on that journey. And that's just been brilliant. Thank you so much, James.
Great, my pleasure.
Loved hearing more about your story. Obviously, I've known you for a long while, but haven't always heard the background bits. So lovely to delve into that. And Zachary, you've been a fantastic co-host. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to seeing you on another episode of Behind the Future.
That concludes another brilliant episode of Behind the Future. Thank you so much for listening. You can listen back to other episodes on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, as that will help us to grow this podcast, ensuring we can get the best guests on here for you to learn from. You can also follow us on socials, linked in the show notes for exclusive content. See you on the next episode.